Good morning, my name is Cindy and I paint pretty things. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience tabling at an anime convention for the first time after owning my own art shop for about 4 years now. So a little bit background on me. I've applied a couple years now to Zenkaikon because it is a local anime convention to me. So it felt like the best fit as far as the very first time I would do a convention to figure out if it was something that I wanted to actually pursue multiple times a year. So I applied 3 times, including this past year. I applied in 2023, 2024, and then in 2025 was when I finally got in to be able to table in 2026. I've applied to other conventions. I've mostly been rejected from them or waitlisted. There was an anime convention called Zenkaikon that I was taken off the waitlist, but it was a little too close to the convention for my liking, and it being my first time, I really didn't have anything prepared, so I opted not to do that one. And I did manage to get into Otacon's lottery one year. But that actually happened to be a year that I wanted to attend an anime convention for the first time in like 5 or 6 years, and I wanted to cosplay for the first time in a while, so I ended up not tabling there either. Even though this is my first anime convention, I've done multiple local art markets, like makers markets, so way more catered to the general public, but the tabling experience and the customer experience is pretty similar, I found, and so I didn't start from nothing. So as far as prep went for me, I had to take what I had for the art markets, the makers markets, take what I had for that display and then turn it into something more artist alley friendly. I would say the bulk of my merch is fan art, which I don't typically take to those art markets because it's not really for that audience. So I had way more merch to showcase at an anime convention, and I also wanted to introduce a bit more of a menu style. For art markets, those tend to be 100% self-serve, and that's what the general public is used to. But I would say at artist alleys, the audience there is more used to menu style, where you just have a display of all of the different merches, and then you just ask the person, hey, can I have this? So I wanted a combo of those specifically for my large art prints because I am mostly an art print artist. So I started with a sketch of what I was hoping the table to look like. I was inspired by a lot of different tables and a lot of what a lot of people do with print displays where they have kind of the backdrop. So I started with a sketch of that as well as figuring out new displays, new ways I wanted to display my merch. I have a lot of bookmarks, for example, and my previous method was literally just putting them out flat on the table and people would just pick from there. But I wanted something more upward, something that was more eye-catching and easier to pick from, so you didn't have to like crane your neck to take a look. So I bought a couple display pieces, and then I did my very first round of a test display, which looks like this. It's pretty shoddy, takes up a lot of my tiny little living room, and so I just used 8x10 pieces of paper, which is the size of my large prints, and then I just taped them along to get an idea of how many I could fit, as well as the general format layout of the display pieces for the bookmarks and the stickers and my small prints. It was after that test run that then I was able to get an idea of what was working, what wasn't working, and also from there I was figuring out kind of the aesthetic I was going for. I already had a bit of an idea with the art markets I did, but I wanted to shoot for something a little bit more specific. So I did a whole lot of Pinterest researching, trying to avoid the AI images to get the vibe that I was looking for, because I also wanted to do an update on my banner design, on my business card design. I wanted to design full catalogs for people to grab from. If the table was too crowded, then they could just grab a catalog and kind of get a feel for all of my stuff from the back without having to wait, which I found very helpful. And so then across the time that I had to prepare, which was about 2 months, I had applied in September, and then I heard that I had got accepted in January, and the Artist Alley was in March. So I had about 2 months to prepare. So bit by bit, I slowly collected the different display pieces as well as the decor pieces, the garlands, the aesthetic pieces to my table that weren't super required or necessary, but they did add a more cohesive feel to the whole table. And then after lots of testing as well as creating new merch specifically for the Artist Alley, I was able to get my table to look like this. And once again, as you can see, it takes up a huge chunk of my dining room, but I was really happy with how it turned out. There were definitely some things I had to work through that I found there were issues with it during the convention, but for the most part, I was pretty proud of what came of it. It was also during this time that I had to figure out as far as producing the product. I produce almost all of my products in-house, so my stickers and my prints and my bookmarks, I make all of them in-house, so I had to decide if I still wanted to do that or if I wanted to outsource. I opted to do everything in-house, and when you're prepping enough products to last you a weekend, I found that the labor wasn't quite worth the small amount of money that I saved doing it in-house versus outsourcing. So something I might do differently for the next convention is outsourcing specifically my prints and then making my stickers and my bookmarks in-house to reduce that load, because an entire week was spent just making products. What I did was I made a quantity of 5 for everything, and that was just to last one single day of the convention. Because I'm local, I was able to make more at the end of each night, so I could get a better gauge of what quantity would fit the weekend. And I found that about 10 to 15 of everything was a pretty good fit, a pretty good quantity for everything. So just something to keep in mind. Now, moving on to my experience with the convention. So setup was pretty similar to art markets. So if you're unfamiliar, then typically there's some sort of check-in process. They will give you a map of where you're at before the convention. I think in most cases, it's at least a week before the convention. For art markets, sometimes you'll find out the day of, but that makes sense because those are single day events and they're much shorter than anime conventions. But either way, somehow you find out where you are. They tell you where to enter, the best place to park, if there's a loading dock, if you're even allowed to use the loading dock. In this case, the loading dock was for vendors in the dealer's room only. Artist Alley artists had to come in just through the regular entrance. And so I came in through the lobby to get into the entrance for Freedom Hall. There was an elevator for us to be able to take down the cart that I brought with all of my stuff. And there was a table for me to check in, get a reaffirmation of where my table was at, get my artist badge. And it was there that I bought my 2 helpers badges for my helpers as well. Now, we had the option to set up Thursday before the con really starts. It was Thursday afternoon. There was maybe like a 6-hour window or something, or you could set up Friday morning before the Artist Alley opened at 11:30 that day. I opted to set up on Friday. I don't have a super complicated setup. Like I don't have like hundreds of keychains, for example, to put out. So I opted for Friday, which would have been fine. Except that morning I happened to have some health related issues that really set me back, and it made us get there later than I originally wanted. I'm a time anxious person, so we definitely had plenty of time to set up, but it being my first convention and also because I am just really all about being set up on time / early so I can just sit and chill and know that I'm ready, it made the situation pretty anxiety inducing, especially because I wasn't feeling my best that morning either. So I think next time, if I'm able to get in, or the next convention I do, I might opt to at least partially set up Thursday, because if I had at least the skeleton of my setup put out, maybe not necessarily all of my products, then I would have felt way more comfortable coming in Friday morning. / if I couldn't make it, then I would feel confident that my helpers could still set things up without me there if needed. So that's something I would do maybe differently. As far as Friday itself, thankfully my health issues improved as the day went on, but it was a really great day. The first couple of hours, people trickled in, but I would say by at least 2 hours, maybe even only 1 hour in, it was pretty steady. It was pretty crowded. I actually didn't expect as many people to buy that day as they did, because I know when I go to an artist alley, I like to get a lay of the land and kind of see everything before I make purchases. But there were plenty of people who just were there for the impulse buy. And so that was a pretty good day. And it was long because, again, art markets tend to be like 6 hours at most, but this was an 8-hour day in addition to setup time. So definitely prepare yourself to be there for the long haul. Definitely make sure that you're looking out for yourself, drinking water, taking breaks, eating food. That's where my helpers were really fantastic, because I'm pretty bad at taking breaks at these sorts of things, and I tend to feel a little too anxious to leave my table to walk around. So yeah, Friday went pretty good, and then in the evening, before we closed up shop and covered everything up, I took note of things that I felt like could be restocked. So I essentially took anything that I felt like was worth it to do. I restocked back up to the quantity of 5 that I started with on Friday. There wasn't a ton for me to do, because I found that because I have so many prints and so many stickers, that there was kind of an even amount of things that were bought versus just one thing being really popular. Coming into Saturday was a lot more casual because there was no setup to do. There was really just show up, fix any parts of my display that might have been feeling a little shoddy, and then restock, which was pretty quick, and then kind of just hang out until we opened at 10. I would say Saturday, everyone knows this. Saturday is the day for people to be shopping, and you could really feel it, because unlike Friday, which had like a bit of a trickle in the beginning, Saturday was crowded from the get-go, and the crowd itself was way more condensed Saturday. Friday had like some ebbs and flows. Like I would have like a few sales hit at once, and then I would like have maybe like a 10-minute break, and then some more would come through. Like it was pretty steady, and Saturday was even more so. It had some ebbs, but those ebbs would last maybe like 5 minutes, where it'd be like a couple minutes of like no one in front of my table, and then all of a sudden there's a whole crowd in front of my table, which obviously was very exciting to see. And it was very nice to talk to people who have similar interests to me, pointing out things that they like, or letting me know that they are coming back later, or letting me know that they're buying this or that for their friends. It was really nice just to talk to people, because I think artists, we spend a lot of our time just like drawing, so it's a very like within yourself kind of experience. So that's kind of what I was shooting for the most for these conventions, was just like connecting to people, because it's hard to get that when you are a work from home freelancer. Saturday, I also found, was the day for a lot of people to make large sales. That was definitely my day where people were just buying like 6 large prints all at once, which obviously is really great and a really an amazing feeling for me, who has steady online sales, but they're always like slow. Like every couple of weeks I'll get an order, and they tend to be like lower on the price range because I have stickers, and most people buy stickers because they're cheap and they're easy. So for people to buy my prints when I'm not really a huge presence online, so I don't even really get much engagement on Instagram or Tumblr or anything, so to get the feedback of people like this enough to buy it was really eye-opening for me, and definitely a nice ego boost. It helped that I had a few prints from the same series. Specifically, I have a set of 4 different prints that are portraits of the dragons from Akatsuki no Yona, Yona of the Dawn. And then I also recently came out with an illustration with all of them, including Yona and Hawk. And I had multiple people get the full set of dragons and the full gang of prints, which is really amazing. So then again, at the end of the day, I took stock. This time I opted to restock to a quantity of 3 instead of 5 because I foresaw Sunday being lower in sales simply because it's a shorter day compared to the other days. I think not as many people potentially will be at the Artist Alley, even though it's the last day, but it might be a day where they're just going around to do other things, or they're just popping in for a second and then they're leaving to go hit the airport or the train to get back home or what have you. The restock this time was kind of more of the same. It was like 1 or 2 of multiple different things. Because so many people had larger orders, I did need to make a few more Saturday night instead of Friday, but it wasn't a super huge task for me to do at the end of the night. Sunday then was kind of what I expected, but then also not what I expected. So I expected it to be a slower day, which it was, but at the same time, when I checked the numbers, it actually wasn't as slow as I thought. It definitely was less crowded than the other days, and I felt like there was more ebb time, more in-between time of sales. And so I was like, oh, today's gonna be like a modest day. But then when I checked, I was like, no, actually it was still another pretty good day. And my guess is that even though there were less people in the hall, the people who were there to buy for sure, versus people who were roaming on Friday, for example. They're just there to like look at things, not necessarily because they're like actually there to shop, versus if you're there on Sunday, your goal is to buy the thing that you weren't sure if you wanted to buy or not. You're not really there to check things out for the first time anymore. You've already seen everything and you know exactly what you're looking for. So I had a few people who wanted some things that I was out of stock of on Saturday, who I was like, hey, come back tomorrow. I'm going to have more. And to my pleasant surprise, they did. They came back and they showed up and you could see it in their eyes. They went straight for the thing that they wanted that I ran out of the day before. Packing up then was like super bittersweet. I, at the end of Saturday, was starting to feel like, all right, this has been really fun, but I'm ready for it to be done because it is a very long and stressful process. So putting things away, takedown is way quicker than setup. I would say setup took me about an hour. And this was my first time doing this setup, so I'm sure in the future it'll take less time. And then takedown took maybe like 30, 45 minutes or so. But yeah, we took everything down and we pieced out, and it overall was a really great experience. It was kind of everything I was hoping it to be, and there were some hiccups, mostly Friday morning, but the rest of the weekend I would say went pretty well. There were some moments where my card reader wasn't working, for example, and those were kind of worrisome moments, so I might look into Wi-Fi things, maybe not necessarily paying for Wi-Fi, because paying for Wi-Fi through the hotel is quite expensive, but I might look into things that guarantee that I won't run into that issue again. It was definitely a huge learning experience, which was, I think, the fun of it, really. I was definitely ready to rest. It was a very social weekend and a very labor-intensive weekend. I mean, I was clocked in for double shifts, essentially. So once I got home, I did some rest, and then I took count of all my stock so then I could put this video together for you and get the statistics together. So let's get into the part that you're probably most excited for, which is the money, the numbers. And here we are, day 1, Friday's numbers. So on Friday, I had 53 sales and I sold 126 products. And across those 126, I sold 20 large prints, 7 mini prints, 61 stickers, 6 sticker sheets, 25 bookmarks, 5 wooden pins, and 2 miscellaneous of the other products I don't have too many of. These numbers are not surprising at all. I fully expected stickers to take all the other products over as far as number of sales, especially because I have a bundle deal where you can get 3 stickers for a discounted price. I was a bit surprised because bookmarks tend to do a little bit better than this. Selling only 25 is interesting, but they didn't do badly. They did pretty good, and I was pleased with the number of large prints that I sold. Compare that to day 2, where I had 92 sales and I sold 199 total products sold. Once again, the stats are pretty similar, where stickers are the number one thing that I sold, selling 91, and then the next is large prints with 39, and then mini prints and bookmarks about even with 20 and 19, 13 sticker sheets, 9 wooden pins, and 8 miscellaneous other things. Day 3 on Sunday, which surprisingly, like I said, was actually comparable to Friday sales. I expected it to be maybe like 3/4 of Friday sales, but it was pretty close, with 48 sales, 119 products sold. Once again, same pattern. Mostly stickers at 65, 17 large prints, which actually that's a lot considering I sold 20 on Friday. And then 9 mini prints, 6 sticker sheets, 14 bookmarks, no pins unfortunately, and 8 miscellaneous items. I definitely think that I could up my game as far as sticker sheets sold specifically, because that was one of the few things that I did not have a bundle deal for. And most people bought 1 sticker sheet. If I could entice them to buy 2, I probably could have increased my sales if I had a deal or a special going in order to get 2. I was also kind of surprised overall at the number of mini prints. I think, or I assumed rather, that most people would rather buy a mini print than a large print. However, I did not have it so that I had same designs both in the large and the mini print sizes. I had large prints that were large only, and then I had mini prints that were mini print only, and I did have a couple of my more popular large prints, people asking if I had them in the smaller size as well. So that's definitely something for me to consider in the future. And then here's a grand total for the full weekend. I sold 444 total products and I had 193 sales. So that means I sold a whopping 217 stickers, which also means that I made 217 stickers. In fact, I made way more than that because I made 5 of every single sticker, and some stickers were more popular than others. And 76 large prints, which is pretty fantastic, 36 mini prints, 25 sticker sheets, 58 bookmarks, 14 wooden pins, and 18 miscellaneous. And if we break that down into percentages, that means stickers made up 48.9% of all of my sales. So damn near 50% of my sales went to stickers, which again is not a surprise because it's a really easy thing to get if you're wanting to support the artist, but you can't really afford to get any larger ticket items. So I think that's why it's really important to have a good range of prices where you can have the things that are easier to just impulse buy, like, oh, like my stickers are $3 each, or you can get 3 for $7. I literally heard someone say like, oh, 3 for $7? I have $7. And I'm like, that's the exact mindset I want people to be in, where they're like, I like this art, I want to support this artist, I could spare a couple bucks. And that's where you go from no sale at all to something, even though it's a smaller ticket item. Then large prints made the next highest amount, which was 17.1% of the sales. And then again, bookmarks come in third with 13.1%, mini prints 8.1%, sticker sheets 5.6%, wooden pins 3.2%, and miscellaneous 4.1%. The wooden pins actually, even though they're a very small percentage, that's pretty good considering I only have 6 designs. I'm not a huge pin seller, not a huge key. I have 1 keychain design, and that's where it went into miscellaneous. Actually, I think I didn't sell any this weekend, but the fact that the wooden pins even made 3%, I think pretty good considering they're not a huge selection that I have compared to my stickers, which I believe I have over 50 of. All right, and here's the moment you've all been waiting for, the actual dollar amounts. In sales, on day 1, Friday, I made $895. Now, it's all subjective. I am not someone who ever plans on making a living off of this, but in my experience with general public art markets, this single day alone completely blew all the other markets I did out of the water. The closest I came to those numbers was I vended at our local Pride last year, and that was a $700 some day. And this was higher than that, and it's one day of the whole weekend. So, needless to say, I was very happy with my numbers for that day. On day 2, I made $1,520. Now, Saturday did feel much busier than Friday, but I didn't think it was that much busier. I think, again, what played a huge role in that was how many large orders I had, how many people who came and bought like 5 or 6 prints. I think the most number of prints someone bought was 7 at a time. They literally came up and they were like, I'm going to be getting a lot. And I was like, okay, sir, like absolutely. Now for day 3, I made $767. Like I said, pretty close to Friday's numbers, which I didn't expect. My guess was that Sunday was going to be around a $500 day, and I was even kind of prepping myself to not be disappointed if it was less than that. So when I checked my numbers and that was how much I made, I was happy. I was definitely happy. So then in total, that means I made $3,182 in sales. Did I expect the weekend to be a $3,000 weekend? No, but I also had no expectations. So really anything was going to be good. I think for my very first time doing an artist alley, that I was very happy with it. I know other people will make like tens of thousands of dollars. Although Zenkaikon is a relatively smaller convention, I believe the attendance for this past year was a little over 9,000, which is much bigger than it used to be. It definitely is a growing convention, but places like Otakon have tens of thousands attendees, so that's gonna be different, and I would say I'm pretty happy with that. Now, the next thing to consider, though, is the expenses. How much did it cost to table? Because profit is taking your expenses out of the sales. So let's see how I did. The table fee for Zenkaikon was $213 for the weekend, which is actually really good compared to other conventions. And another reason why I really wanted this to be my entryway convention, because other conventions you're looking at $400, $500 table fees, and that doesn't even include the badge. This table fee included the artist badge. I also got 2 helper badges, which came to $64. Then the venue required that each artist have vendor insurance, and so I was able to get a decent deal to cover the weekend for me for $49. And because I decided to make everything in-house, I had to buy my own paper and my ink. So I spent about $275 on paper and $200 on ink. I also got new banners as well as business cards and other things printed, and that came to $78, as well as packaging such as like little bags or little sleeves to put the prints in to give people. That was $75. Food for me as well as my helpers was $137. And then I use a PayPal. Originally it used to be called Zettle, but now it's just PayPal. My card reader, the fees that got taken out for all the sales was $63, and then $180 of that was sales tax that I will be handing off. That is not my money. So then the grand total of expenses was $1,334, which means in profit for the weekend, I made $1,848, which once again, I am very happy with. I think this being such a positive experience and a learning experience, I very much was going into it feeling like if I could just break even and maybe make like a little bit of profit, so I didn't work 3 long shifts and made 0 money, that was the ideal. Like I wanted to make maybe like $500 in profit. So the fact that I made almost $2,000 in profit for one single weekend, when I'm used to very much more humble numbers, it was a really good weekend, and I'm really happy with how things went. On top of this, I will say I did have some extra other expenses that I didn't put into this. The reason being, they were costs for the tables specifically, so not stuff for this con, but for things that I will continue to use at every single convention moving forward. So I felt like those were investments in the table and not exactly Zenkaikon specific expenses. For those, I spent about $464 on the table displays and the decor. And then I spent another about $100 on other table specific things. For example, I got a folding table, like a 4-foot folding table for the back behind so we could organize things. And then me and my helpers had places to put our drinks and our food. And the decorations, like the flower garlands I have and the little star garlands, those are all things I will continue to use at every single event that I go to. So I saw it as an investment in the table's future. So even if we take that into account, I still made a decent profit, and that this weekend alone paid for things that I will continue to use as far as my tabling career goes. So once again, still very happy with all that. The other thing too is that I wasn't necessarily trying to take the absolute cheapest route as far as my table setup. You definitely can spend way less money than I did on your table setup and still make it look nice. So that was something to keep in mind too. Because I've had this shop for a while and I separate my business expenses, anything that is for the business, I am a little more willing to just swipe that card because the money stays in the same place. Any money I make is going back into the business, so I feel comfortable spending that money. But again, you don't have to be spending like $20 on a flower garland like I did, for example. So from there, I wanted to do a money breakdown of each product type as well. So again, in total, I earned $3,182. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, a huge chunk of that money was from large prints alone, which is very interesting considering that they were such a small percentage of the product types that I sold, but I made the most money from them, which does make sense because they are my highest ticket priced item. So I made $1,442 from large prints, $295 from mini prints, $564 from stickers, $175 from sticker sheets, $396 from bookmarks, $174 on wooden pins, and $136 on miscellaneous other items. Looking here now at the pie chart, that means that 45.3% of my earned income was from large prints alone. So it's funny, the large prints and the stickers kind of switched places there, where the stickers were almost 50% of the product type that I sold, but large prints were almost 50% of the income earned. So then coming up second was stickers with 17.7% of the income. And then mini prints with 9.3%. Oh, and bookmarks at 12.4%, sticker sheets at 5.5%, equal to wooden pins, and miscellaneous 4.3%. And again, I just wanted to compare those two. On the left is the product types and their split up. So again, stickers are taking up most of the sales there. But as far as money earned, large prints are taking up most of the sales. So I just found that really interesting. It was also funny how the numbers ended up being so similar. I think I'll be able to take these numbers then and kind of figure out how my pricing is doing, if there are things I should be making cheaper, if there are things that I should be maybe considering to make more expensive. And so putting these numbers together was really helpful for me and hopefully interesting to you, because honestly, I don't think that there are a ton of people who share these numbers, whether because they don't feel comfortable or that it just doesn't occur to them to share them. So I had fun really crunching these numbers, and I hope you enjoyed looking at it too, and it helped you figure out your own maybe future setup or how you could improve your own setup as well. So then the next segment was a segment that I found very interesting, which was what were the most popular items at the table. I definitely wanted to do a local event because I had no clue which pieces would be the most popular pieces. I had an idea for some, but for others, I really didn't know, and there were a lot of really pleasant surprises. So we're going to start with the most popular large prints, and in third place came the Saja Boys, and I sold 6 of those over the weekend. This was not a surprising one. The fact that K-pop Demon Hunters is a very topical thing, I 100% expected my K-pop Demon Hunter prints to do well. In second place was my Sato Sugu print with 7. That's also one that I expected to be popular. It single-handedly raised my sales by the hundreds on Etsy alone before Etsy took it down. So I really expected this one to do well, and it didn't disappoint. And then in first place, we have, shockingly, my Akatsuki no Yona of the Dawn print. This one was one that I was just hoping would do well, but wouldn't be surprised if it didn't do well. So this is just a series that I happen to really like. It definitely has a following, but it's not as hugely general public popular the way that Jujutsu Kaisen and K-pop Demon Hunters is. I was hoping I would find fellow Akayona fans because of the announcement of the second anime season finally, and I made this print because of that announcement and in prep for Zenkaikon, so I was really happy and pleasantly surprised that it was the #1 art print that I sold this weekend. Moving on to mini prints. Coming in third place is my Soma, my Soul Eater Maka Chibi art print with 4. And then sharing first place was my Death the Kid, Liz and Patty Chibi Soul Eater art print and my Chibi Usa and Anya crossover art print. So Soul Eater was a big one over the weekend. That was one that I did not expect. I didn't see it coming at all. The same thing that I was told every single time was, nobody has this. Nobody has Soul Eater stuff anymore. And so I guess there was a need, and I was one of the few people in the hall who filled that need. So I sold a lot of Soul Eater stuff, and I got, even if I didn't sell it, I got a lot of people commenting and pointing it out and being like, oh my god, so cute, oh my god, I love Soul Eater, like I never see that anymore. Like I heard that so many times that it definitely encouraged me that maybe I should be making more Soul Eater stuff. I don't know. The Chibi Usa Anya crossover, I didn't really think too hard about this one, but yeah, it's definitely gonna be a popular one. That was another one that people commented on and pointed out as they were like walking by, like a lot, like, it's Anya with a gun. That was the print. That's how people called it. They were like, can I have the Anya with the gun print? And I was like, yeah, girl, get it. This was one that I just made for fun. I'm a Sailor Moon fan. It originally is a Sailor Moon meme, and, you know, little pink-haired girl in Sailor Moon, little pink-haired girl in Spy Family, which I also love, made that crossover, and people really liked it. Yeah, silly stuff always sells well, I think. Next, we have our most popular stickers. In third place is the Saja Boys and my Black Star Tsubaki Chibi sticker. Once again, not surprising, Saja Boys, Soul Eater. They won this weekend. I don't know. In second place, we have Usa-chan. Usa-chan was a huge one. I think it helped that at this event, the voice dub for Haruhi Fujioka was there, so a lot of Oran fans, I assume, were there. And Usa-chan has also just kind of got like a nostalgic hit if you were into Oran back in the 2010s. So this one sold a lot. I definitely had to make more, / I prepped more of this one specifically. And then in first place, we have Huntrix. So yeah, where Saja Boys won in print sales, Huntrix definitely won in sticker sales. Why that is, I have no clue. But yeah, that was one that I had to keep making over and over. And that was one of the ones where someone wanted it, but they came when I sold out. So then I was like, listen, come back, I got you. And thankfully they came in time to be able to buy one the next day. Sticker sheets was one that I also wasn't sure of. When I have done other places, one of the few fan art things that I would include in those art markets was Studio Ghibli sticker sheets, because Studio Ghibli is a little bit closer to more general public. So the results of this one did surprise me a lot, because the only expectation I had was that the Studio Ghibli sticker sheets would sell well. I wasn't sure about the other ones. And in third place came Spirited Away and my Vietnamese food sticker sheet with 3 of each. Spirited Away being in the top 3, not surprising at all. I think it tends to be one of my most popular among my Studio Ghibli sticker sheets. And in second place was my Howl's Moving Castle sticker sheet. This isn't surprising that's in the top 3 at all. It's by far my most popular Studio Ghibli sticker sheet, but the fact that it was second place was what was a little surprising, with 5 of those sold on the weekend. And in first place is my Fruit Ham sticker sheet. This one is a original art of mine. I never expect my original art to sell that well. However, my Fruit Ham series is one that is general public friendly because it's cute. It's just really cute. People like fruit on things, and people like cute round animals. So it combines those two things. I didn't expect the sticker sheets to do well, considering I had the Studio Ghibli ones, but I think the key is that the Fruit Ham designs are originally wooden pins. Those are the 6 wooden pin designs that I mentioned. The wooden pins are $14 each, or I had a gotcha offered where you could do $12 and get a mystery one. So if you like the Fruit Ham designs, but you don't want to pay the whole price for a wooden pin design, the sticker sheet was how you could still get the design, but in a cheaper way, and you could even get all 6 designs. So I think that, like, psychologically was a huge reason why it did so well, which obviously I'm really happy about. And then next we have most popular bookmarks. In second place, we have my Sailor Moon wand, which I sold 5 of. This is a die-cut bookmark, so it literally looks like a wand that you just put into your book. This one was a newer product that I was really excited to see the feedback on at the convention, and I was really happy that a lot of people liked it. And then in first place is the Gojo bookmark I have, the Cardcaptor Sakura wand, and the Shugo Chara bookmark. Once again, the Magical Girl set, that was a set of bookmarks that I made. It was also a print that I made, and the bookmarks did really well. I think it helped that this year's theme was cherry blossoms, so it's got like a super Magical Girl vibe, and it definitely hit on the nostalgia. The Shugo Chara was another one that a lot of people commented on, like, oh my gosh, like, this was my favorite, I can't believe it. Like, another, like, no one has this sort of thing. So those did well. I definitely had to make more of them. And the Gojo bookmark, what can I say? It's Gojo. So even though putting these numbers together was a lot of work, because it means I had to do math and I had to do a whole lot of counting and figuring out how many I made in between each night and how many I sold and all that stuff, it was really fun and interesting. I really enjoyed putting this together, and it helped me a lot to see what worked in ways that I expected them to and what ways that I hadn't considered. What I really appreciated was the number of people who came to me saying, like, oh my gosh, like, I love this thing, I grew up with this thing and no one really makes it anymore. So it really showed me that it was definitely worth it for me to make things that I like and that I enjoy, even though they're not the most popular topical thing. Like, it would have been obvious to make something heated rivalry, for example. It would have been obvious to make something Chainsaw Man. But I haven't consumed that media, and it would have been something that I made just for the sake of making it. So when things that I made because I liked it sold, it felt way more rewarding versus if something sold and it was because I knew it was going to be popular and it sold because that person likes that thing. It feels a bit more of like a disconnect. I know a lot of people do that and that they're doing it right and that they're making money. But for me, because this isn't something that I'm trying to do full time, it was really nice to know that the effort I put into specifically only make things that I actually wanted to make paid off was really nice. Like Soul Eater. People don't really talk about Soul Eater anymore, but it is one of the series with some of my most favorite characters, so making that stuff was really rewarding, and I made it quite some time ago. It didn't get much reach as far as engagement, but the fact that it had the top sales in so many different categories over the weekend really showed me that it was good for me to stick to my guns and stick to my gut on that. I think something else to note is that just because you're making something popular doesn't guarantee that it'll get sold. Because it's popular, therefore more artists will have made stuff from that series. For example, one of the prints that I expected to sell way more of was my Apothecary Diaries print. And that one is a pretty topical one. The season ended not that long ago, and I know people are very excited for the movies and the next season coming out, so it's definitely still talked about, and it's a little bit more general public popular, I would say. Not quite to the level of like Jujutsu, but it's definitely up there. So I expected to sell more, but I think because a lot of other artists also had Apothecary Diary prints, if they saw those prints first, they're probably more likely to buy those versus mine, who they most likely saw later on, or they just liked that other artist style better, what have you. And so automatically I had more competition for getting sales on those prints versus the Akatsuki no Yona prints, where I'm sure not that many artists had it, that I was able to sell those kind of more immediately. For the buyer at that point, it kind of becomes a no-brainer because it's just like I really like this thing. This is the only artist who has this thing, so I'm gonna buy it from this artist. So that's kind of nice to have a bit of almost guarantee as far as sales go. And it was in doing this and figuring out how many I've sold of each product that I found that the most number of anything that I sold was 13. And obviously the least number I sold was 0. But on average, 5 to like 12 was a good range of the number of products I sold specifically at Zenkai. So you could probably guess that a convention that has less than 10,000 attendees, 10 is going to be a pretty good number for you to have. A big fear that I had was that I was going to sell out of something and then those would be sales I would be losing. But what ended up happening is that because I didn't have some of the things, people would just bought other stuff. So it kind of just led them to go buy things that were less likely to get sales because I ran out of the like super popular stuff. Of course, there were some cases where they're like, that was the only thing I wanted, so I'm not buying. But specifically for stickers, if people came back later and they're like, oh, that thing I was thinking of is gone, I'll just get this one instead. That happened pretty often, so that was nice. Now, to finally wrap everything up, like I've been saying, this overall experience was very inspiring, very encouraging. It was a very stressful time to prep for. I'm also just a stressed out person, and I like preparing things and trying to think of every single problem that could possibly happen and pre-prep for it, so that doesn't help. But it is very much a big thing to prep for when you've never done it before, even though I have done tabling events before. So it's not like I was starting completely from zero, but even then there was just a lot to do. So it's fun. It's also a lot of work. But in general, it was a very cool learning experience. I left with ideas of things I could make, things that I could explore, ways that I could improve my display for next time. I learned that the bundle deals are key. They are key. The number of times that someone was kind of like looking at, like, for example, a mini print. They're like interested in one, then I could kind of slide in there and be like, oh, by the way, if you get 2, then you can get 2 for this much. Or same with the large prints. There were times where someone only wanted 1 large print, but then I was like, oh, well, if you want to pick out another, then it's only this much more. And they're like, oh, well, okay, you talked me into it. It doesn't have to feel scummy. Like, I think sometimes artists tend to feel, they're like, I don't like the feeling of like marketing myself and selling myself, but you don't have to like be in people's faces. In fact, you shouldn't, because that's exactly how you're going to get them to like leave the table, because they're probably very like-minded to you and that they don't really super want to chat or talk. But if you just kind of sense the vibe they're going for, or sense like, oh, this person's looking at the stickers, they're looking for stickers. This person's looking up at my print display, maybe they're considering a print, and you can see them like actively start to pick, you feel like you're about to make a sale, then you can be friendly and just be like, hey, by the way, if you feel like picking out another thing, you could be saving this much, or you could get it for only this much more. Oftentimes, for example, people would pick out 2 stickers and they'd be like, they'd literally give it to me to buy. I'd be like, oh, well, do you want to pick out 1 more? Because it would only be $1 extra. And most of the time they picked out another one because it's like, yeah, $1 extra. why not? So those were huge, and I think I could revamp things to actually take advantage of that stuff even more. What was also great was I got to connect with other artists. I actually did a stamp rally, which I didn't really talk about at all, but I participated in a stamp rally that was spring love themed. So I made a Haruhi photo card as part of the prizes, and I teamed up with 2 other tables in order to do the stamp rally, which was super fun because it was interactive for the attendees. And then even more so, I got to just talk to other people who vend. I think it's really great when you're a beginner and it's your first time somehow making a natural connection with artists who have done this and who do this full time. There were definitely people who have a lot of events on their schedule, so I was able to ask them their advice, and they were very nice, and it was a really nice experience, and I'd love to do it again sometime. I also took the opportunity when I took a break to walk around, try and connect with other artists whose art that I just like. I was able to gain a couple of mutuals that way. In general, I gained a good amount of followers of just people who took my business card, even if they didn't buy anything from me, which is great. The stamp rally, again, my first time, so I have no clue what a great successful stamp rally is. My stamp rally mate did tell me that our rates were pretty good. We had a little over 20 people pick up prizes, and we had a $5 minimum, which meant that I made at least $100, probably closer to $200 from people doing the stamp rally. So money-wise is also a great thing to do, but you know, that was a bonus for me. It's hard to complain because it was the best sales I've ever had at any event I've done before. So the money was great, and it was really encouraging. When you're continuously denied and rejected from events like this, it can be easy to feel like, oh, like, am I just not good enough? But you have to remember that a lot of different elements go into being accepted into these kinds of things. It could be that they'd love to have you, but they just have too many people who sell the same thing that you do or very similar things. I worry that because I'm mostly an art print seller, maybe that was holding me back, because Zenkaikon tends to have sellers who have like a lot of stuff. Like they have hundreds of keychains, they have hundreds of charms, they have hundreds of pins and buttons, they have socks, they have shirts, they have like all sorts of stuff. And I'm simply just not a seller who sells those things or is even really that interested in selling those things. So I was really excited to be a part of an artist alley that I've kind of grown up with a little bit and have been around and have gotten to see grow as much as it has. I think a huge lesson is like, not to be corny, but like, don't give up. Looking at it now, applying for 3 years in a row and finally getting in on the 3rd try isn't that many times to get rejected in like the grand scheme of life. But when you're applying like almost a whole year before the convention happens, and then you have to wait months and months and months just to get rejected, it can feel like again. But I'm really glad that I still continued to do it, continued to try and improve my work and my table, and really focus on things that I enjoy making, and trying to hone in on the cohesion of everything and my brand and all that stuff. And clearly it worked out because I got in. I still continued to get rejected from other places at the same time. So that's really something you've got to know. There are people who do this for a living and they make way more than I do, and they still get rejected from places. Gotta remember that. Again, it's not something that I want to do full time because it is very tiring, and I like to have a variety of things to do. I don't think I would want to do this full time. It's a lot, and I did this locally and I'm tired. I can't imagine not being local, having to travel, having to get a hotel, having to stay at a hotel instead of being able to just go home, and also pre-pack all of the stock for the whole weekend and just know that what you have is what you have. Like that's a lot. It would be nice to do a couple a year, I think. I actually applied to a couple of other places. I do all the time, even if I'm not sure if I'll actually want to participate. But I'm waiting on answers from Otakon as well as CCE, so we'll see. And if I get in, then maybe I'll make a video about that too. Now, this video was mostly about my kind of first impressions, my experience, and well as getting down to the nitty-gritty of the numbers. But I kind of glossed over what my process was with my setup, what my process is with making my products, as well as what the back-end organization and the logistics look like. So if you wanted to know about any of that stuff, I'd be happy to do a second video. Just comment below with any questions that you might have, and I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time.